I had emails about Ros Mansell not being available for this one, but on my list it says that Ian Hodge is actually the committee member.
Yeah, I've just spotted that myself as well, so we're not expecting Councillor Mansell at all, so it's fine.
So we don't need to record apologies from her. Right, that's fine. Right, as we're getting close to time, I will share my screen now. Where are we? Not that one, this one. The actual bit we'll be voting on when it comes to adopting the flood report and these three parts of the motion. This is, it in full. That we approve it, that we refer it to full council, and that we call on full council to approve it and adopt it. Just so there's no surprises for anybody. I will obviously read this out when we get to it, but I just wanted to give people a chance to have a quick look at it, beforehand, and so that people know what's coming down the line. Oh, hello, Gina.
Sorry to interrupt. I've just had a text from Councillor Dave Healy. He says he's replaced Fran Lister on this committee, but he hasn't been sent an invite for this morning. Thank you.
I'll send an invite now, Councillor Madison.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
I wasn't aware of the change, so.
Right, okay. Gina, are you on this committee or are you a sub?
Sub.
Right.
For Councillor Buckley.
Right. Okay, do we want to start the live stream then?
Bear with me a moment, Chair. Let's call the details up again. Live streaming now, Chair.
Thank you very much. Welcome to this meeting of Flintshire County Council's Climate Change Committee. I would start by asking for any apologies. Does anybody have any apologies? If you can, please use the raise hand function to offer them. I'm not here. Oh, Mr. Goodrum.
Just Chair, just to note the substitution for Councillor Mel Buckley, Councillor Gina Madison is subbing for Councillor Buckley today. And I believe we're expecting Councillor Healy shortly.
Yes, I understand there's been a change in the committee makeup with Councillor Healy replacing Councillor Lister. Just to note that. If nobody else wishes to offer any apologies on behalf of any members? No, we shall move on. Any declarations of interest? Does anybody have any interests to declare in any items on today's agenda? Again, if you do, could you please use the raise hand function? Nobody is indicating. Item 3, minutes of the previous meeting on pages 3 to 6 of the agenda pack. Before we go any further, can I have a mover for the minutes as a correct record, please? Councillor Coppell, and a seconder. I am happy to second them. Does anybody wish to speak to the minutes or raise any issues of accuracy? Again, nobody indicating. In that case, we will move to a vote to adopt the minutes as a correct record of the meeting held on the 6th of September. All those in favour, please show. Any against? And any abstentions? Thank you. That is carried and the minutes are adopted as a correct record. Action tracking, pages 7 to 10 of your report pack in front of you. I think obviously this is a reasonably new item for the committee. We've only started doing it. I think this is the second meeting it's appeared, and very welcome as it is. There's nothing that's been closed in the intervening period. I believe I'm right in saying that nothing that's down here listed as open has since been closed. But if any officers want to advise me otherwise, Mr. Goodrum?
No, you're right, Chair, and I will take an action for myself to follow those up to make sure that they are updated or a committee is provided with an update before the next meeting.
Brilliant. Can I have a mover for the recommendation that the committee notes the progress which has been made? Councillor Marshall, and a seconder, Councillor Coppell. Thank you very much. Does anybody have any comments or wish to speak? No, in that case, we'll move to a vote. And the committee notes the progress which has been made. All those in favour, please show. Any against? And any abstentions? Again, that is carried. Item 5, terms of reference for the Climate Change Committee as amended. Now, again, we discussed this in a previous meeting, so it is something that members should be familiar with. We don't have any recommendations in the agenda pack for this, so I think this is, I assume, just for the committee's information. Mr. Goodrum, if you'd like to confirm or correct?
Well, Andy Farrow, Chief Officer, had his hand up before me, Chair, so I'll concede to Andy first.
Mr. Farrow?
Yeah, thanks, Chair, and apologies for joining slightly late. I hope somebody passed on Alex Ellis's apologies. She's ill, which is why she's not here. She's got COVID, so she's unable to join. So this one, it's to adopt these minutes. If everybody, these terms of reference, if everybody is content with them, as you said, you've discussed them before, and they come out of a recommendation, don't they, from into an audit that was undertaken of the committee's work. So hopefully Alex has completed and added to the terms of reference and reflect the previous discussion.
Okay, Mr. Goodrum? You're on mute, Steve.
I've never done that before. Sorry, all. Right, as I was saying to myself, it went to Constitution and Democratic Services Committee early this month, and there was one very minor amendment to the term, which is why it's come back today for the committee. On page 11 of your pack, under paragraph 9.6.5.3, it says work to achieve collective cross-portfolio responsibility. Originally, it said work to ensure. So it was just the ensure changed to achieve. That was literally the only change made at Constitution and Democratic Services Committee. So it's just bringing that back for clarifying for the committee's awareness.
Okay, oh,
sorry. And just to add, it will also go to full council in December for formal ratification.
You've preempted my question. Brilliant. Right, so if this is just for the committee's information, Councillor Marshall?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I've already submitted a markup of this this section because the numbering doesn't flow properly, and Steve's told me he's going to reformat it at a later date. So that this numbering system that you see here doesn't make sense, really. So I just want to make a note of that for you.
Okay. If you're happy with this, Councillor Marshall, I think probably because we don't have any motion here today, rather than going into standing orders and suspending this to allow us to table things and amend them, it just get messy. If you're happy that that will be resolved either before it goes to full council, or you've obviously got freedom to table amendments at full council. If you're happy that we as a committee don't take a position on that today.
Well, I've submitted the information to Steve to do, so it's down to him to tell us when he's going to do it, really, before or after full council.
Brilliant. As we don't have a motion, we'll move on to item 6, which is decarbonisation of the supply chain. And we are to have a presentation for this. I think it's Roberta, is this you?
Yes, it is. Yeah, thank you. So I don't know whether, I'm not really sure. Do I need to share my screen, or you should have the presentation? It will be shared.
Maureen, are you able to advise?
Apologies, Chair, I was on mute. I can make you co-host, Roberta, so you can share your screen.
Okay, lovely. Thank you.
There you are. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. I'm just looking for, there we go. Perfect. And share. Okay. I won't necessarily put it in presentation mode because I tend to find that I get too confused with those, so apologies. Good morning all, Borada, and thank you very much for allowing me to come and present. You may have seen me at previous meetings, so this should look fairly familiar. The second slide is the overview of why we are looking at supply chain decarbonisation. This should be not news to anyone attending this meeting. Of course, we have the Welsh Government Net Zero Strategy, everything linked into the Wellbeing of Future Generations Act, Denbighshire and Flintshire climate change strategies for 2030. And although there may be an update on the percentage, and perhaps Ben will be able to speak to that. When my position was created in September of last year, the target for supply chain reduction in carbon emissions was set at 60% by 2030. We had the Denbighshire climate emergency declared in 2019. Of course, the new procurement reform and social partnership bills coming up. And we have the knowledge that supply chain emissions, both in the private and the public sector, tend to account for 60 to 90% of reported emissions. And certainly for the report given by Welsh Government for 2023-24, supply chain emissions across the public sector was sitting at 69%. So it is a large amount, and it certainly needs attention. My role, again, just as a reminder, and for those who may have not have met me previously, is I am on a 2-year partially funded contract, which ends in September of next year, to develop the strategy and implement the reduction of supply chain carbon feeding into the Welsh Government's own objectives. From the outset, we realise that in order to be successful, it needs to be clear, it needs to be appropriate and proportionate, and we need to have a large amount of collaboration. So what's happened over the past year? Well, I'll just start off by saying that, of course, the collaborative procurement service that works across Denbighshire and Flintshire County Councils has been through many changes, and of course, all local authorities are struggling with budgets and resources to a certain degree. Of that, of course, we're also very aware. And that the collaborative procurement entity exists in our situation as an advisory service. So to a certain degree, we can try to ensure that service areas are taking decarbonisation into account at the very inception of projects. But of course, by the time it reaches the procurement entity itself, certain questions that could have been asked at the initial stages may be slightly too late. And there are trainings coming up that may address those that I'll refer to in a later slides. But what we have had over the past year, and from the very start of my role in September of 2023, we had the introduction of the 2023 WLGA toolkit to service areas. This was rolled out as created by a contractor still working with Welsh Government. And my understanding of it now, which is better than it was 12 months ago, is that this is a tool that was designed for Welsh Government to try to determine what are we trying to capture from the service areas. How can we do that the easiest if we're wanting to put key provisions into contracts? How do service areas understand what they need to ask? We certainly have rolled it out to all the service areas at this time across Denbighshire and Flintshire County Councils. But I would say from an experience point of view now, having worked with it and supported various service areas on projects with the toolkit, it isn't finished by any means. And certainly there is work in progress that I'll refer to in a later slide to enhance this tool, certainly from a social care point of view, but also understanding that this is an ever-changing landscape of being able to report on supply chain emissions and how complex the issue is. Through connections that I've made in the WLGA, also across the North Wales LGAs and with Welsh Government, we can see that it's a long, I'm not a fan of the word, but it is a long journey. And we are right at the start of it. Everyone is struggling with how to appropriately report and how to be asking proportionate questions at this stage, especially taking into account SMEs who may be struggling with even the concept of how do we start looking at emissions. So I would say the WLGA toolkit is still a work in progress at this stage. We have created a supplier-facing supply chain decarbonisation presentation. It's been shared with the North Wales Construction Framework, the design and print suppliers who were involved in a pilot before my position was even created, and at various Meet the Buyer events where I've been invited to participate in the introduction of these projects. This presentation includes links to all the appropriate strategies of Welsh Government and of Flintshire and Denbighshire County Councils. It links to guidance that we have received recently from South East Wales with Crown Commercial Services template for carbon reduction plans, with our own carbon calculator, various trainings through the Supply Chain Sustainability School, and obviously myself as a contact. So the idea here is to hold hands, if you like, and certainly be within that partnership for our suppliers, whether they be large entities or all the way down to our smallest SMEs, so that they are not spooked by the questions, so that they understand that we are being collaborative and we want to help in an overall effort to reduce supply chain emissions, both for ourselves and for them. And quite often, reducing emissions can also be linked to reducing costs. So this is a collaborative and beneficial presentation, certainly not presented as this is what you have to do. We're not going to help you any further, but you have to supply us with this information. That is not the intent by any means. So we have been trialing a carbon calculator for reporting. I've been collecting that data and also looking at ways that we can simplify the process, and of course who will be able to carry on with this work once my role comes to an end. Have initiated inclusion of requests for supplier carbon reduction plans in all tenders, and that's all tenders of which we are actively involved. Again, that's the minimum that we can do at this stage, and many of our larger suppliers are very much on board with this. They already have their own carbon reduction plans, and that's fantastic. Our smaller suppliers, again, may need a little bit of support. There's the free training through the government commercial services, so that they can take advantage of that and develop their own carbon reduction plans. It's the first step on the ladder, if you like. And that information and that data also means that we can immediately start apportioning our own emissions instead of purely basing it on spend, which has been all that we've been able to do since the inception of reporting back to Welsh Government. And as we know, reporting based purely on spend is certainly not going to get us to our target and is not representative necessarily of actual carbon emissions that have been created on our behalf. Alongside trying to put concrete support in place, both for our internal service areas and for our supply base, I have participated in and become part of the Climate Strategy Panel Procurement Task and Finish Group, chaired by Wayne Wellesby, the North Wales Decarbonisation Group, and recently, at least partially due to my presentation, a subgroup within that for the supply chain task group. I've made connections with WLGA procurement colleagues and sustainability colleagues, Welsh Government. I've provided input to Miller Research. Miller Research is the contractor who is currently updating the WLGA toolkit I referred to earlier. Posterity Global, who is working with the Welsh Government for the Ceith website, which is the Welsh Government procurement website. Business Wales, I have meetings coming up with them shortly to determine how the work that they do may be aligned to what we're trying to achieve, and also to ensure that we are not duplicating efforts, and to see how they may be able to support. The Carbon Trust, who is working with Welsh Government currently on improvements of the data methodology. And I have shared resources for the Ceith website and liaised and shared resources with other North Wales LGAs and the procurement entity for NHS Wales. I feel that this is important work because it allows us to stay on top of upcoming changes, understand the work that is going on, understand that perhaps where we are today, it will look very different in a year's time, in 2 years' time, in 5 years' time. Again, everyone understands that particularly within this area, it's very tricky to get appropriate and correct data and to be able to report it in a way that compares apples to apples instead of apples to ladders or something completely ridiculous, which is where we seem to be at the moment. There have been improvements to data coding to simplify the reporting and encourage a unified LGA approach. I've spent a lot of time on looking at the way that we report back to Welsh Government to try to ensure that it genuinely is appropriate and that we are reporting in the correct categories. I will hold my hand up to and admit that a year ago I spent much time remapping those categories. This year I've spent more time actually looking at the supplier categories and matching our categories to those. I don't want to get into a fine detail because I think that will just detract from the main messages I'm trying to present here. But it does take a lot of work. It's incredibly time consuming. But the assurance that I have is that the procurement entity for NHS Wales has done the same activity. And so that is the way that they are also looking at the data. And I've been in discussions with them as to how they've done that. Again, it's trying to get to a unified approach so that we are all singing off the same hymn sheet, if you like, and we are all reporting back to Welsh Government in an appropriate way. And then this is my last slide. I'm not really sure how much time I have, so certainly, Maureen, let me know if I'm going over. But these are the main points that are coming up next as far as our work is concerned, and also the challenges that we face. So we have a sustainability procurement review. This is government funded, and we are initiating this. We're having our first face-to-face meeting on the 9th of December and should have a report back on the first quarter of 2025. So RAP will basically come in. They will do an assessment and audit of our processes, of our forms, of how we are trying to address sustainability within procurement, how effective we may be, any improvements that could be made. So I think this is a very important overview, and very much looking forward to taking part in this process and seeing what they come back with and how we may be able to improve. I mentioned already, Miller Research is doing an enhancement to the WLGA toolkit, particularly to cover the area of social care, which is admittedly tricky. Their report and recommendation are due in 2025, again, I believe in the first quarter. Having said that, the report and recommendation are due, but then any actual updates to the toolkit, we don't know when that may take place. So for my part, at the moment, I'm waiting to see how that develops, and then how we may be able to have a relaunch of that toolkit in order to support our service areas. There is a big drive to transition from spend-based to apportioned or contract-specific emissions reporting. This is essential, again, because spend-based reporting is not going to allow us to reach our targets. We all know that prices are not going down in any way. So if we continue to report based on spend, then we are not going to reach our targets, and we are not going to be able to help Welsh Government reach their target in supply chain emissions. Along with the fact that prices are continuously rising, there is also the issue of spending in areas where we know that there is a carbon reduction. For example, if we buy EV for fleet, we will have lower carbon emissions, but of course that tends to be more expensive. So Welsh Government is very aware that this methodology is not working, and this is why they have started the contract with the Carbon Trust, where this report is due in January of 2025, and project completion by March 2025. I actually was present in Procurex a couple of weeks ago, where the representative from the Carbon Trust presented on the work that they are hoping to do. I feel that it is very ambitious. I hope that they are able to provide Welsh Government with what they are looking for. The presentation from the Carbon Trust went down to even an item that was purchased. So the example that they gave was an iPhone, and then the various methodologies that could be used to determine our part in carbon emissions for that phone, for example. It was very complex, and it is very detailed if you're looking at product by product. And of course, some areas are services, so that may take on a different methodology, but we can very much be looking forward to the work that they will do. What I will say is when I spoke to the representative after his presentation, he did say that this is a very complex area and certainly it will take time. And he said, you know, he's looking at up to 5 years potential, which time they hope to genuinely have more of a handle on genuine emissions that are created from supply chain. What I am certainly hoping to do, because I've been working extensively with the data, is to be able to go to each service area with the impact of their service area on supply chain emissions, and to be able to present to them, obviously looking at the currently largest emitters, and again, understanding that is currently based on spend, but to be able to take it to them so that they are able to understand what it is we're reporting back to Welsh Government on their behalf for supply chain emissions, and then get them involved with how we can potentially reduce that. At the moment, if we can get everyone, all service areas, to ask for carbon reduction plans, that will at least give us some data that we can apportion. And apportioned data coming from the suppliers that has to do with energy or fuel is better than purely spend-based data. Again, it isn't perfect, but it's an improvement. And what I would emphasize here as well is that as we get this improved apportioned data, what it will mean initially is that we have a more realistic baseline from which to work. It will not necessarily mean, just because we have better data, that we are reducing emissions. Once we have the better data, that is what will allow us to demonstrate that we are reducing emissions within supply chain as we work with our suppliers. And certainly we need to include net zero clauses, and that will be coming with the new Procurement Act as well. But I think those clauses have not been completely defined and signed off at the moment, but there will be net zero clauses in contracting, which is excellent. But again, we do have challenges. Certainly, firstly, with contract management. Management does not sit with procurement. So this is not something that the procurement entity can follow up on and report on and work with suppliers to improve. So this is one of the questions of who takes on this responsibility. Service areas in general do look after their own contracts, but do they have enough resources to ensure that they are genuinely following up on any key provisions that are included around net zero commitments and decarbonisation? Will they be able to follow up on it? And will they also request that data on a yearly basis so that we can report in at least an apportioned way while we're waiting for Welsh Government to come back and tell us if we can certainly report item for item? Data validity and responsibilities I've listed here. Again, we are constantly trying to improve the quality of the data, because if we don't have good data, then any improvements that we may show are not necessarily valid. Again, if it's purely spend-based, how does that genuinely relate back to carbon emissions? And responsibilities. And again, this is looking forward, because certainly something that I want to work on in the new year is ensuring that these considerations become business as usual. Who is going to ensure that the data reported back is as close to realistic as we can get? Who is going to crunch that data? Who's going to make sure that conversion factors that occasionally change are appropriately applied, and that data comes back and is reported by the climate change team? You know, and I see Ben here today. He's very aware of the intricacies of reporting the data back to Welsh Government, but to ensure that we have confidence in those figures. Once we have a more apportioned approach to data reporting, then we can genuinely engage with suppliers and see how we can reduce that. But who is going to take on those responsibilities? SME onboarding, again, as I mentioned earlier, we need a very collaborative approach. I am more than happy to always attend Meet the Buyer events or any annual meetings that are coming up with suppliers, just so that we can make it as simple and easy as possible for suppliers to be doing the right thing, which is starting to engage on this path of decarbonisation and at least having a carbon reduction plan so that on a yearly basis they can report their carbon back. We can take that data and we can use it. And then finally, LGA alignment. Certainly on the committee meetings on which I sit, there is an appetite for ensuring that one message goes out to suppliers and that one methodology is used to go back to Welsh Government. This is not the case at the moment. And there are various issues around resources in different local authorities, around how is South Wales doing it compared to North Wales? Do we have to have our own methodologies? How are we deciding on the categories that we're reporting back on? Again, I refer to the remapping exercises that I've done over the past year. And all of this just means that if we can at least go to our suppliers with one message, then they should feel more reassured. If they have a carbon reduction plan and they have that data available, then they can provide it to any local authorities. It's the same data. Certainly if we're using apportioned data, it's just one approach, it's just one ask. So we're working together to try to achieve that one voice, if you like, and that seems to me to be the key to success. While we wait, as I say, in what appears to be an ever-changing landscape of how we report, the methodology, the data, if we're looking at whole life carbon, for example, there is training, as I mentioned earlier, that is available as well through Ambition North Wales. And that is to engage with service areas at the very start of developing a business case so that appropriate questions can be asked at that stage. And I think that's incredibly important. As I say, the issue that procurement sometimes has with ensuring carbon reduction to procurement, it's already too late. Any questions that could have been asked at the beginning, at the inception of a project, you know, they may have been asked, which we would hope, or they would not have been taken into consideration. And by that time, they already have a plan. So we're trying to educate service areas. We're trying to educate suppliers. We're working to align with other local authorities in both North Wales and across Wales. And then we're looking to see improvements to data and what the landscape is going to look like for both councils as business as usual moving forward throughout 2025. And I was asked to do an update, and that's pretty much where I'm at. But certainly do feel free to ask any questions. I'd be more than happy to try to answer any of them. Thank you.
Thank you. Could I ask that you stop sharing your screen so that I can
Yes.
go back to seeing everybody? Right. We now hit an issue that we have come up against before, where there is no provision within standing orders for us to actually ask any questions. 9.7 of standing orders allows questions to be asked at overview and scrutiny committees where somebody's given a presentation, but not this one. Now, unless any member of the committee objects, I'm just going to ignore that so we can ask questions. I know that that's not the proper way of doing things, but my view is that it's not the intention of standing orders to restrict questions here. But if anybody does wish to object, then we'll stick rigidly to standing orders. So can I ask first of all if anybody does object to speak up? Nobody objecting, right? Well, we'll proceed as is, but this is one for Constitution and Democratic Services Committee, I think, to take up. Councillor Healy, you've got your hand up.
Thank you very much, Chair, for using your discretion appropriately so that we can actually get involved in this important discussion. And I mention the word important because I think the work that Roberta's doing is immensely important, given the fact that procurement and supply chain emissions are the biggest one amongst the various emissions that we have across the authority, and in Roberta's case, the two authorities. So she's doing very, very valuable work. It's a pity that we're having to move away from. No, I'm glad that we're moving away from the spend model because it's clearly not working and totally unsatisfactory, and we need to have accurate data. But it's a pity that by the time almost 2030, when we're supposed to be at net zero, we'll only really begin to have accurate details as to what our emissions are with regard to this particular area. And we mustn't lose sight of the key objective, which is actually to reduce those emissions and reduce them profoundly and to make a difference. I'll get round to my question. What I'm wondering is what we can do as councillors to help by way of, this isn't a scrutiny committee, but on the scrutiny committees we're on, by asking the right questions in order to facilitate progress with regard to reducing emissions over procurement. I'm going to ask the tricky question, Roberta, as to what extent, and I know I'm not expecting you to name the naughty portfolio areas, but I'm asking the question about whether you are happy overall with the level of cross-portfolio buy-in to this particular mission, of moving away from the spend model to get more accurate data, and also actually getting on with the job of trying to reduce those emissions. Are you happy with the level of cooperation that you're getting within the council?
Thank you, Councillor Healy, for those very important questions, and also for reminding both myself and the committee that you are absolutely right. We are tying ourselves up in knots at the moment to try to be able to provide at least correct data with what we are currently doing. But the overall goal is to reduce emissions, and certainly news, you know, in the past few months and throughout this year, that we have missed the 1.5 degree target, that we are looking at higher, you know, degrees, that carbon sinks for the past year, that we rely upon to absorb so much carbon from the atmosphere. Last year absorbed nothing. You know, we are in a genuine crisis. And to your point about how happy am I that there is buy-in, you know, across the various service areas, I think that the impression that I have is that there is a willingness, but of course there is also much pressure from a resource and a budget point of view. I think that, as I mentioned in previous meetings, there are preconceptions that asking these questions is always going to mean more work, that they would need someone else to help, that suppliers may not be happy, that it's always going to cost more. And these are barriers that I've been trying to break down over the year. To be absolutely frank with you, I tend to rely upon my procurement colleagues to ensure that I am involved in tenders, upcoming tenders. And so that comes from my procurement colleagues. It is not coming from the service areas in general that they contact me. I am not being consulted regularly or hardly at all, to be honest, when it comes to the WLGA toolkit that I worked to roll out at the end of last year. I do believe that part of that is because the tool is slightly too complex. And speaking to the developers of the tool, Miller Research, I think there may have been a little bit of a miscommunication between themselves and Welsh Government, or Welsh Government may have just been very, very keen to take on the work that they had done. I don't think it was ready and fit for purpose at the stage that we are at now. I think we are at a very simplified stage. You know, we can work towards becoming more complex, and certainly including, you know, multiple key provisions within contracts. But we're not at that stage yet. We're at the very start, and this is across the public sector. Anyone that I've spoken to who's struggling with this area says the same thing. You know, at this stage, all we need to be doing is requesting carbon reduction plans. My colleagues within procurement, they know this, and they are pushing from their side as well to ensure that we are asking that question. But I would love to see, you know, more involvement and more interest from the service areas. I don't know whether it's a case of, you know, councillors like yourselves and the impact that you could potentially have from the top down to enforce this as such an important area, because as you say, it's the majority of the emissions that are being reported here, rightly or wrongly, depending on how you see the data. But therefore, it seems to be a little bit of a no-brainer that this is an area we should be focusing on so we can cut that down. I'm not sure exactly what the answer is. I feel like if we can get service areas involved in the Ambition North Wales training, that is a very good model, because it is starting at the initiation of a business case and how those questions can be asked of suppliers to reduce carbon. I would say, being devil's advocate, the other side of that is that, again, fortunately, Welsh Government is looking at this, but we need a better way to capture decisions that we make where we avoid carbon creation. Because at the moment, I don't have in my area a way to report that, yes, we could have done a project that would have resulted in X number of tons, but we decided to go with a project, you know, through innovation with the supplier or whatever it might be, that now results in half the amount of emissions. We should be able to capture that. So again, I'm hoping that Welsh Government excuse me, is looking at those types of considerations. You know, whether we decide not to do a project at all can also potentially be a big saving in emissions. We did not create those, and they were on the plan. So it's incredibly complex. You know, whole life emissions for a project, you know, tend to be broken down into embodied carbon and operational carbon. But when we look at the tool that Welsh Government has provided us with to report back our carbon emissions, well, it's set out very differently. Sorry, I've gone on a bit there, but I hope that's answered your question.
Fascinating response. Councillor Healy, do you have a supplementary?
Thank you very much. And thank you very, very much for your response, Roberta. I'm just wondering if there's any way we together as councillors can formulate a way forward and a way to approach our scrutiny committees in order to assist you by way of maybe asking for the item of procurement to be put on the forward work programme of different portfolio areas, and then asking questions about to the extent to which those areas may be liaising with you in order to acquire information about the WLGA toolkit. I'm wondering if that is perhaps our concrete actions on our part that we could actually take to facilitate the job that you are doing. And we're actually hoping to work towards reducing emissions in this very important area. I'm just wondering if that is a strategy that we could agree as councillors emerging from this committee, that might be a way forward. The issue of procurement doesn't naturally arise in our scrutiny committees. I think we'd have to be proactive in actually focusing on that and actually saying, well, can we discuss something along these lines in as part of our forward work programme? Thank you.
Mr. Goodrum, Democratic Services Manager, do you want to respond to the point about overview and scrutiny committees?
Yes, please, if I can, Chair. It's obviously an important area for discussion and challenge, I suppose, is where it comes down to the scrutiny. I'm quite happy to pick that up with Roberta outside of the committee, just to see how we can, or as part of my role as Democratic Service Manager and reviewing the scrutiny committees, how they work, how that can be introduced and sort of woven into the actual questioning skills for members of scrutiny committees. It probably comes under the section about all the impact assessments, and I would suggest initially from the discussion I've heard today, but I'm quite happy to take it that with Roberta and see how we can sort of try and marry that into the process of scrutiny, rather than each scrutiny committee having its own particular work streams of procurement. That sits under CROSC naturally, but obviously it will touch across all scrutiny. So I think it's important that is coordinated centrally by the CROSC and possibly even Democratic Services Committee as well, just to ensure it is done in the right way and consistently across all scrutiny committees, if that's okay with the committee chair and committee members, and also Roberta obviously as well.
Councillor Healy, given that this was your question, are you happy with that as a means of progressing?
I absolutely. I think it does mean that something positive as a step forward can come from the discussion that we've had, and thank you to Roberta.
Brilliant. Councillor Marshall.
Yeah, thank you for that. I'd like to use a bit of an analogy, if I may. Many of you will know I'm an electronics engineer. So I've got a multimeter here, which measures voltage, current, and resistance. Now, when Mr. Ohm came up with Ohm's law, and I'm very familiar with it, he was able to come up with the relationship between them. So when Mr. Ohm came up with this formula, he didn't have a multimeter. He had no idea really what he was measuring. So, but he came up with a law, which is very important. I use it virtually every week. So you're in the same position that you're trying to measure carbon emissions, but you don't really know how to do it. And you're trying to measure, I think, carbon emissions by measuring maybe the carbon content of fuel, various things. So you're in a bit of an unenviable position, I think.
Thank you, Councillor Marshall. Yes, yes, I suppose I am. But of course, as Ben will know from the climate change team as well, we are. All of the data and the emission factors, they come from the Greenhouse Gas Protocol. I think there is a lot of information and there is a lot of actual data that is known, per category, as you say, whether it has to do with fuel or whether it has to do with energy. And again, I mean, it's so complex, as you will appreciate, I'm sure. And there's a balance to be made as well, the impact of buying one thing over and to other sustainability issues also, and I'll just bring up, you can buy solar panels, but, if the majority of them are coming from China, how confident are we that, modern slavery practices are not being, used and that there's an impact of that. So overall sustainability is also tricky in itself. And this is why I try to focus and stay focused, sometimes a bit obsessively, just on the supply chain. But this is again, it's so broad. And at the moment, the actual data that we are able to report back on tends to be emissions created on our behalf by the suppliers. And, you know, again, as you mentioned, that could be fuel, that could be energy. But when it comes to the actual product that we are buying, there is also the danger of, you know, reporting multiple times the same data. If a manufacturer makes a piece of equipment, you know, and then it's a wholesaler who has bought that piece of equipment from them, well, then the manufacturer of that, you know, is reported by the manufacturer and then potentially by the wholesaler that buys it from them. By the time it gets down the line to us, if we're looking at embodied carbon, how many times has that carbon actually been reported? And is that an actual reflection of the carbon that's been produced for that item? So I'm not a scientist. I've been brought in to roll out a strategy and to try to keep things as simple and easy and straightforward as possible. There are people who are far more knowledgeable on the actual emissions per product than I am. But what I'm trying to do is go by what Welsh Government is telling us we have to do. But, you know, again, working with Ben, you know, he fills out the forms to report back to Welsh Government. There are multiple tabs on that form. Supply chain is just one, and all that we're able to report back on at the moment is either this is how much we spent with the supplier has this category code, so that's what it falls under, or I'm able to get data that allows us to have that apportioned data, apportioned by spend. But again, that's only looking at the one side of it. That's not looking at the product itself. So I think everyone understands when we have these discussions that we do not have a perfect way of moving forward and that they're still trying to figure that out.
Councillor Marshall, do you have any follow-up?
Just one more. We've got Pagewood cement works in the county, and that's estimated, I think that is correct, that it produces 800,000 tons of carbon dioxide every year, and about 2/3 of that is in the process of converting limestone into lime, which gives it off. So the only way of reducing that is to make less cement. That's it. Thank you.
And I am, thank you again, Councillor Marshall, very aware of, you know, again, this is the other complexity, isn't it? You know, we are looking at industries that are hugely important for the area and for our constituents. So it's trying to get that balance. Again, others will know far better than myself about new technologies that are around cement and different mixes that can be done, and potentially even, you know, not within creation of the cement, but, you know, end users on the other side. I wish I had a magic wand and I could make everything wonderful, but it's incredibly complex. But I feel like if we take small steps forward and we ensure that we are working in the right direction and we are trying to improve both the data and our suppliers' way of looking at this area and potentially seeing savings that can be made by lower emissions, then this will help us feed into our overall targets, both for the local authority and for Wales.
Thank you. If any other members of the committee do have any questions, I'd ask you to use the raise hand function. In the intervening period, as there aren't any raised hands, I have a couple of questions myself. First of all, in recalculating in updating the methodology used for carbon emissions, is there a proposal to recalculate the baseline? I think it's a 2017 baseline that we use. Is there a proposal to recalculate the baseline emissions using the new methodology? And if so, what's the confidence level that we have the data to be able to recalculate the baseline accurately? And second of all, is there a sort of price per tonne of carbon avoided that Denbighshire and Flintshire use? And if so, is it the same for both councils? Obviously, if you've got two options to procure a certain product and one, you know, emits 50 tonnes less carbon and they cost the same, then you'd go with the lower emitting one equally if that one's cheaper. Brilliant. If that one is more expensive than the other, is there a sort of price per tonne that councils use to sort of determine whether it is worth paying the extra or not? And as I say, if there is it the same for both councils?
Thank you very much, Councillor. It's interesting questions again. From my point of view, but you know, it may be up to the climate change teams to decide. I don't believe that there is much need to recalculate the baseline. Now, emission factors have changed over the years to a slight degree, and certainly in the report that came out from Welsh Government on 23-24 emissions, they also highlighted all through the report that in various ways where savings might have been shown for carbon emissions, that these in general had more to do with the change in various conversion factors than they actually did in a reduction in carbon. So from my point of view, there is so much leeway and so much inaccuracy and potential movement within what we have reported, you know, since the 2019 baseline, that if we make a note when we report back to Welsh Government, and I have spoken to Welsh Government officials who actually receive our data. And what I will say is they are not all that concerned. I mean, I know that we have our own targets for our local authorities, and really that's where we're trying to show that we're making an improvement. As far as Welsh Government is concerned, they understand that the data is flawed. You know, they've also said, you know, at this stage, it's even voluntary. You know, they are working on improving the methodology. What they are far more interested in is ensuring that all new suppliers, and certainly major suppliers, and over the threshold of spend, which is 6 million for Wales, that they provide us with carbon reduction plans. Okay, so that's the first step. Again, having said that, of course, I understand as well that the data is important for us locally. You know, what we want to be able to show is that we've made an improvement. But I think we simply at this stage, understanding that we are all in the same boat, you know, across Wales and potentially across the UK, that we just have to make a note that changes within what we've been able to report, aside from the apportioned data that we are starting to collect, and certainly that I will be focusing on for reporting in next year's reporting back to Welsh Government, that any improvements purely on the spend based may have to do with changes in conversion factors or simply less spend. What I'm trying to do, and I'll just so that you can kind of visualize it, we have tier 1 reporting up at the top, which is based on spend, and then we have tier 2 reporting where we're able to report either apportioned data or, if we were so lucky, exact carbon emissions, which is a potential to do, especially with large construction projects. Because if we ask large construction companies right from the onset, can you provide us with a carbon footprint for this project? You know, this is what's envisaged and this is what it turned out to be at the end. They can do that. Okay, so that's what we're working for, and especially putting a lot of effort into in the new year. As far as the price per tonne of carbon, Denbighshire and Flintshire, yeah, are using the same the tool that was provided to us by Welsh Government for avoided carbon. Personally, I mean, again, we may have to go to Ben for this, but I don't have a way to report that.
Okay, Councillor Dolphin.
Yes, thank you, Chairman, and thank you, Roberta. It's been very illuminating and frank and honest, I think, this morning. It's been realistic is one of the words you used, and with the time frames that are sort of been given for the future, 5 years or so, we lead up very close to 2030, if not into 2030, where targets are set. And if it's possible, and it must happen. It's essential that we have one methodology for the data. It's all data driven for everybody. It's this one way, perhaps, that that organisations, Welsh government, UK governments, any government really, could make sure that their figures are closer and more accurate than they are now.
Thank you, Councillor Dolphin. I think that is why Welsh Government has, contracted the Carbon Trust to come in and do the piece of work around the reporting methodology that we're hoping to see at least a start of next year. I think it's so widely known that this way of reporting our data, at least for supply chain, is just so inadequate, and that you might as well just be putting a finger up in the air to a certain degree, that there has to be an emphasis on improving this reporting. So I think that we're with bated breath to see what the Carbon Trust comes back with. Again, I feel that what they're trying to do is the right thing to do, but I also feel that it's hugely ambitious, certainly having grappled with the data as much as I have over the past year, to be able to say, you get to a point where we're able to input for a specific product and or service, and it will come out as accurate as it possibly can. Again, as I say, the example they gave was if we were to buy an Apple iPhone, and his presentation went through at least 3 different ways to come up with the carbon emissions for that iPhone, worst, best, and somewhere in between. And that's with a company that is very open and has their data available. A huge company, obviously, Apple. And if you want to go in and see what emissions go into creating an iPhone, then you can see it. And for me, also, it also raises the question of, again, that double counting issue. If Apple is, reporting emissions on their manufacturing processes, once it gets to us through whatever intermediary means, we need to ensure that we're not double counting what they've already reported. And where does the line then stop? And that's why at this point in time, what we're looking at mainly is just emissions that the suppliers have emitted on our behalf in providing us with the goods and services. The actual embodied carbon that is in those goods, that is reported elsewhere. So it's a very strange thing. Scope 3 reporting, which is what Scope 3 area is, there's only a small part of that is actually supply chain. So it's incredibly complex, and trying to separate it out so that we're not double counting, but also ensuring that we're reporting on actual supply chain emissions is tricky and it's intricate, but I am hoping that the work that the Carbon Trust is doing for the government at the moment will make that clearer and allow all of the councils to be able to go back with a clearer reporting methodology. And again, as you kind of allude to there, this is work that Wales is doing. How is this going to match up with the rest of the UK as well? And are we still going to be comparing apples for apples? But that's a bigger question than sits under my remit, fortunately.
Councillor Dolphin, do you have any follow-up?
Yes, I suppose I do. It's to do with cost, which is something which doesn't help carbon emissions or doesn't help climate change at all. If we take the council, for instance, and you're buying slate roof tiles, now you'd think obviously Wales is the place to have it. It's got the best slate in the world, but it's not the cheapest. It's cheaper to come from Spain, so I'm told. And therein lies a massive problem for a council. Cut the carbon emissions, but actually we've got to ship a load of stuff in from another country when we could get it from our own. But because of cost, it doesn't happen. So that's a massive quandary for governments to address, and the climate change as well.
That's a really interesting point, Councillor Dolphin. And again, I suppose, you know, so there's the cost of the item itself, and then there are the emissions that are coming from having a product like slate shipped from abroad. So in that case, for example, you know, we would be taking into account the energy and fuel, etc., that would be going into the actual delivery of those products. So it would be interesting to see and even do potentially a case study of purely based on emissions, buying locally, which, you know, from a quality perspective and also from, you know, a general, you know, feeding into our community and into our economy question we should be doing more of, you know, comparing that to, you know, the emissions that would be created by buying it from abroad. So that would be an interesting exercise to do. But certainly, you know, and again, within the entire realm of sustainability, we are focusing more on, we want to be using local suppliers as much as possible.
Thank you. Thanks.
Okay, thank you very much. I can't. Oh, sorry, Councillor Dolphin.
I was going to say perhaps we could get a good example from Flintshire for Roberta, if that's ever possible. Perhaps Slate would be one.
Okay,
That would be
I
great.
can't see anybody else indicating. So if there are no further questions, all that remains is for me to thank you on behalf of the committee for attending today. It's a very interesting presentation. You are, of course, welcome to stay for the rest of the meeting if you wish, but don't feel obliged. But thank you for that. We now move on to item number 7 in the agenda pack. This is the Flintshire Local Area Energy Plan. Now, pages 19 to 25 of the agenda pack are the covering report, and page 27 onwards is the report itself. Can I start by asking for a mover for the recommendation on page 19, possibly a slightly modified version of it that the committee recommends that Cabinet endorses? Do I have a mover for that? Councillor Healy, do I have a seconder? Councillor Jones, thank you very much. Do we have any officers wishing to address the committee on this, or shall we move straight into member debate? Mr. Farrow.
I think the intention was for Ben to pick this up in Alex's absence. So over to you, Ben.
Thank you, Mr. Farrow. Yes, I can't find my hand to put up quickly enough there, sorry. I would just find the narrative I have here. Okay, yeah, so Bore da, good morning committee. I am covering for the programme manager for today. So since the endorsement of the North Wales Energy Strategy and Action Plan, we started the local area energy planning back in 2023. And the local area energy plan for Flintshire has now been finalised. And you've already noted the recommendation for Cabinet to endorse the Flintshire local area energy plan, both the main report and technical report, which are provided as Appendix 1 and 2. There is a note on here as well to understand that the actions within this are subject to securing and maintaining the necessary funding. Local area energy planning is data-driven and whole energy system evidence-based approach, and it identifies the most effective route for local area to contribute towards meeting national and net zero targets. It accounts for local and national conditions to achieve net zero, looks at the cooperation that we can have with adjacent areas to bring about success, and importantly, increasing stakeholder awareness to increase consent and facilitate credible commitments to achieve that plan. The LEAPs feed into the, so LEAP being local area energy plans, feed into the regional energy strategies, which then relate into national policies. So Future Wales, the National Plan 2040, climate change targets, and the National Energy Plan. The local energy system that's picked up in these plans include whole building retrofit, local onshore renewables, decarbonisation of transport. There is the deployment of heat pumps where appropriate, reinforced distribution network for electricity, decarbonisation of industry, and also hydrogen networks. Ambition North Wales have been managing the contract for the LEAPs on behalf of Welsh Government. And our LEAP for Flintshire was authored by the Carbon Trust and Arup, which was based on modelling, insights from data, and also stakeholder engagement, which was done through a variety of workshops. These workshops had been attended by council officers across various portfolios, elected members, town and community councils, and other external stakeholders, which included large local employers, large local energy providers, and also energy users. And the decarbonisation forum was also included, as well as transport providers, distribution network operators, housing providers, and any energy-focused community groups. With regards to ownership of the LEAPs, this will fall to each local authority in Wales, and then will be aggregated to form the development of the National Energy Plan. Local authorities are requested to endorse the LEAPs through their due process, and it will be reviewed through our Environment and Economy Overview and Scrutiny Committee, Corporate Resources Overview and Scrutiny Committee, and Cabinet. I just want to bring to your attention the members' briefing, which was due to be held last week on the 21st of November. This has now been scheduled to the 16th of December. Members are encouraged to attend this, as in the briefing, Ambition North Wales will be providing an opportunity to further understanding of the LEAPs and consider the details further. And there's also the opportunity there to address any queries that you may have. With regards to delivery and monitoring, the mechanisms of progress LEAP actions is to be developed, and this will include agreeing governance structures, aligning the LEAPs with the North Wales Regional Energy Strategy, identifying appropriate key performance indicators, and also the establishment of a regional steering group. And finally, the LEAP is due to be reviewed in 5 years' time, which by that time we will be approaching the public sector net zero carbon target of 2030. And that is all I have there. If you do have any questions, I'll do my best to answer them. Diolch yn fawr. Thank you very much.
First of all, let me thank you profusely for stepping into the breach at short notice. I know that it's quite a technical subject, so very well handled. Councillor Healy.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you very much, Ben, for taking on what is a challenging task with this report, because there's no doubt about it. I don't think there's anybody who won't say this is heavy reading. It is heavy reading. It's a very comprehensive report, and the recommendation is that we ask Cabinet to endorse it. One of the other things that we've got going on in our forward work programme is that we are going to be giving consideration to the potential of using mine water as identified by the Coal Authority for renewable energy. And it strikes me that this report has been produced independently of the Coal Authority's report, because whereas the Coal Authority recommends or identifies certain sites, such as the hardened borehole, that can lend themselves to this, I'm not sure that these things are flagged up in the LEAP report, because they weren't aware of that work that was going on, and that's been going on independently. So if that is the case, then I think at the very least, in recommending that Cabinet endorses this report, it might need to also have access to the Coal Authority report and be able to recognise that when it is used, it has to be used in conjunction with that, otherwise it might miss a trick. And similarly, if this is going on across all local authorities, and there is an element of mismatch between what the coal authority said, or that they've identified something that hasn't been picked up in respective leak reports, then there is a possibility that other local authorities may think this is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, but again, may miss a trick because of that. I'm just wondering if that is an issue, but in the first instance, whether it is appropriate for us to have an additional recommendation to Cabinet that they bear in mind, I'm not saying endorse, but maybe it is endorsed, but bear in mind the existence of certain suggestions made by the Coal Authority with regard to mine water potential as well.
I will ask the Climate Change Project Officer to address that as best he can. As I say, I know this isn't normally your wheelhouse, so please don't feel under particular pressure here. If you are able to give a response, that'd be welcome.
Thank you very much, Chair. Yes, it's something which we can raise further with the programme manager. I just want to bring to your attention in the LEAP report itself under section 4 action planning. Is it 6.14? It states to explore opportunities for partnership delivery of district heating and cooling networks using waste heat sources such as mine water. So I think as this was being reviewed, there was a suggestion made with regards to the Coal Board report, and I think that action that's been highlighted there is in relation to that. But I'll discuss with the programme manager further on your thoughts, Councillor Healy. Thank you.
In light of that response, Councillor Healy, do you wish to add a recommendation regarding the Coal Board or not?
I think it's probably appropriate that a recommendation that the Cabinet considers the Coal Authority report in conjunction with the LEAP report. I think that's probably desirable.
Okay, Councillor Jones, you were the seconder of the original motion. Are you happy to add that?
I am.
Okay, Mr. Goodrum, were you able to get the wording there? Or, oh, sorry, is it not you?
No.
Is it somebody else taking the minutes? Are we happy we've got a record of
We'll have
what
a
it is?
record of it,
Councillor
yeah.
Healy?
Yeah.
Brilliant. Okay, Councillor Coppell.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. And Ben, thanks very much for standing in and giving a good show. I have just a question on this sort of type of, it's a very complicated subject, but you mentioned there were monitoring systems developed, performance monitoring, and also support from the Welsh Government. Now, with a lot of plans, these are enablers, and if you don't get them, then the plan falls apart. We've only got a few years to get to 2030. So is there a time frame for securing robust support in these areas? And if there is, can we have it written down somewhere so we can reflect on it going forwards?
Thank you very much for your question, Councillor. I'm not aware of a time frame, I'm afraid, so I'm not able to give an answer at this time, but I can take it back and provide a response outside of this meeting, if that's okay.
Okay, and somewhere along the line, could it be sort of amended to or appended to the report itself, so we've got a reference for it? Is that possible?
I've made a note of that, and I'll forward that as a recommendation for the report.
Thank you very much. Very kind. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Deal.
Councillor Marshall.
Back to Ohm's law again. On the Sankey diagram we got on page 52, it shows energy generation and then consumption at the far end, but doesn't show any losses in the transmission system. I heard recently on the radio that they estimate that about half of whatever's generated by power stations is lost in the cabling and the transformers, but it doesn't show it on here. It just shows whatever's generated ends up at the user. Really, there should be a big slope going down there, a loss in the transmission system, because you've actually got to generate twice as much energy as is actually being used. Edison and Tesla were proponents of DC and AC power generation, but Tesla won because it used a centralized power station distributed along high voltage lines to the residents. But now we're back into local generation. Say maybe each house would have a DC source at the solar panels, but then it's converted to AC again. So there's losses in there. So maybe might be need to look at using DC directly inside the houses. So that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Marshall. Mr. Farrow.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. It was just to pick up Councillor Coppell's point about timelines, really. And whilst Ben has agreed to take it on as an action, it might be something that we bring out at that workshop, which was postponed from last week to December. It might be a discussion item at that, Ben, if we tee up our colleague from Ambition North Wales beforehand, and then we can get that answered to Councillor Coppell at that event.
A good suggestion. Councillor Marshall, I think your contribution was more of a point you were making than a question, but I realise I haven't sort of had anybody come in. Are you happy that you've made your point, or were you after a response from anybody?
Well, I made my point. If anybody wants to object to it, fine.
Okay, thank you very much. As I say, if there's anybody else who wants to speak on this, please do feel free to raise your hand. As far as my own views go, I must admit to not being particularly struck on the local area energy plan. I have a couple of concerns about it. I think that it's indicative of a culture within Welsh Government of, when in doubt, pay some consultants. On page 39 in the report pack, which is, if you're following along by individual documents, page 13 of the local area energy plan itself, you'll notice the box on the right makes reference to Isle of Anglesey and about the changes that the Flintshire energy plan is going to make on the island. Obviously, far be it from me to suggest that our local area energy plan is a bit of a cut and paste job, but that doesn't exactly inspire confidence. Equally, if you compare page 41 in the agenda pack numbers, which is page 15 in the plan itself, with page 127 in the agenda pack, which is page 17 in the technical appendices, you'll see that they're identical. And again, the following pages, there's a number of these throughout it. It is a very lengthy document, but a lot of it is just repeats. And the heft of it is perhaps somewhat misleading. My concern is that where the changes recommended are economical, the private sector will do them, and will do them without this report, without this plan. And where they're not economical and would require state investment, the ability of Welsh Government to provide funding is limited by the amount it spends on other things, including paying Arup to copy and paste the same thing over and over again at great expense. Now, if Cabinet wants to adopt it, I'm not going to call it in. I don't object that strongly to it. But I do think that there is a lesson in here regarding, the value of paying consultants to do these things at great expense, rather than, actually getting on and investing in public services. Mr. Farrow, is that a legacy hand, or are you wanting to speak again?
Sorry, it's a legacy hand. I thought it'd come down.
No problem. Is there anybody else wishing to speak? Councillor Healy, as the proposer of the motion, you have the right of summing up if you wish to use it.
I'll just propose it formally, but it is the combined element of asking Cabinet to endorse the report, but also to be cognizant of the report produced by the Coal Authority as well.
Okay, thank you very much. In that case, we will move to the vote. All those in favour of the recommendations as proposed by Councillor Healy and seconded by Councillor Jones, please show. And those against? And any abstentions? That's carried. Thank you very much. Councillor Dolphin, is it a point of order or?
Oh, no, just a question. I was a bit concerned about what you just said about a call-in, because you've asked the committee to accept this report, very large report. And yeah, there are some anomalies in it, which you pointed out, such as the Isle of Anglesey one, and that does need to be, deleted. I would suggest, and that there are some others just to tidy it up, if you like. But I hope there's no suggestion that once it goes to Cabinet and they do endorse it, that it's going to be called in. I just wanted to clear that matter up now.
Well, that would be for any 5 individual councillors, so it's not something that I or this committee can confirm. But
it's not something you're considering, then. That's good.
No, I wouldn't call it in, but no, obviously any other councillors who wish to would have the freedom to.
No, thank you, Chair. Thanks.
Item number 8, the inquiries update. Now, this is in 2 parts. We've got the pensions inquiry, which I will briefly deal with first, because that's the easy bit. The oral evidence sessions I'm expecting will take place in the second half of January. We're waiting on some dates for those, but it'll likely be a Friday. As soon as the date is available, I will ensure that is circulated to committee members. For those members who weren't on the committee at the time when we did the flooding oral evidence session, that will be in the council chamber, and ideally members will attend in person because that facilitates questioning of witnesses. I think generally people found it worked better in the chamber than online. So if members are able to attend in person for that meeting, that would be much appreciated. But as I say, I will ensure that a date for that is circulated to the committee once it's been fixed. There is then the papers that you have in front of you regarding the conclusion, the draft report of the committee's inquiry into surface water flooding. Now, where are we? The motion that I wish to move in relation to this report is that the Climate Change Committee approves the attached draft of the inquiry report on flooding. The committee refers the report to full council, and that the committee calls on full council to adopt the report as the view of the council and to refer the recommendations which do not relate to full council to the relevant bodies for their consideration. Do I have a seconder for that, please? Councillor Healy, thank you very much. Do I have anybody who wishes to speak on this? Councillor Healy.
It's perhaps going to be more of an item for the forward work programme, really. But can I just say, I thought it was a very interesting and very informative report that was well written, and it answered a number of questions. I was particularly interested in the observation that because you wonder why Welsh Water isn't a private company and still is not sort of sanctioned robustly, and it makes the point that Ofwat uses benchmarking that's based on the overall position with regard to England as well as Wales, and so Welsh Water with regard to sewage discharges and so forth, which are part of the problem, gets off more lightly than we might have liked. as I say, the report was comprehensive, but the element that I want to flag up for the forward work programme related to this is right at the outset, the report recognises that this doesn't tell the full story, that with regard to flooding, there is fluvial and coastal flooding as well. And it does say in due course, these areas deserve full exploration. So I'm wondering about, I think the answer with regard to coastal flooding, unfortunately, is probably going to be that we'll adopt the Fairborn model, and which is basically do nothing, because if King Canute couldn't stop the tide coming in, then I'm not sure we can, and that is the most difficult one of all. But with regard to flooding caused by rivers, perhaps when we come on to the forward work programme, I would just raise a suggestion there that we might wish to pursue further via NRW or what have you, but I'd just flag that up at this stage as a possible forward work programme element. Thank you.
Thank you for that contribution, Councillor Healy. If you would like, we can either put it on the forward work programme in a moment when we get to it, but if you would like to have a discussion with me outside the committee about how the committee might be able to take that issue forward and what form that might take, then you know, I'd be more than happy to have that discussion with you. Councillor Jones.
Thank you, Chair. I'd just like to draw your attention to page 375 of the report, where it mentions that the only alternative is a community tax rise. What it doesn't mention, and it mentions there that this might not be popular because some areas who are not prone to flooding, the residents would feel it's not fair that their community charge has gone up to help areas that are prone to flooding. There is, of course, another option here, which is a community council tax rise. The council tax is made up of county council and community councils. There is nothing to stop a community council from putting an increase in their levy to help address flood issues in that area. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Jones. Councillor Marshall.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Healy mentioned King Canute there. My understanding from what I heard recently, he wasn't trying to stop the tides. He was trying to prove to others that he couldn't, and there was no way he could. So, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Marshall. Is there anybody else wishing to speak on this? Councillor Eastwood.
Thank you, Councillor Ibbotson. If you want to put it as a motion for full council, are there any resource implications, or is there an impact assessment and risk management for the report, please?
Thank you, Councillor Eastwood. The recommendations that the committee makes are on page 377 to 379 of the report, and members can look at those and assess them for itself. As a result of this report, there are no decisions being taken by this committee which would incur any direct resourcing implications. If we take, for an example, recommendation 3, this is again on page 377 of the agenda report pack. I'm sorry, I don't have the page number for people following along with individual items. Flintshire County Council should consider maintenance of gullies to be a higher priority in budget setting. A programme of more intensive maintenance in known flood risk areas should be commenced prior to winter 2025. The exact amount of resourcing that would be dedicated to that is obviously a decision for the budget setting process. It is not, even with the adoption of this report by full council, it is a recommendation that this is incorporated rather than a fixed determination as to a value being made at this stage. Councillor Marshall.
Thank you, Chair. Just on that point 3, you said it should increase maintenance of gullies. We in this ward have our gullies and ditches cleaned regularly, but it's the culverts the pipes underneath the entrances to properties gates, they get blocked, they get neglected, and they are the cause of a lot of our flooding. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Marshall. Is there anybody else wishing to speak? No, in which case, to briefly sum up, as some committee members may be aware, I was invited to speak at the Institute of Civil Engineering and Chartered Institute of Water and Environmental Management conference in Cardiff last week regarding the committee's work into surface water flooding and this report. It was an opportunity to bang the drum for both Flintshire and for adequate resourcing of flood preparedness and flood mitigation more broadly across Wales. It was an opportunity to make the case to decision makers in the room, the people there from NRW, from Welsh Government, from UK government agencies as well. I think it's fair to say that all levels of government have failed victims of flooding, and it cannot continue as is. The consequences of the last 15 years of cuts have resulted in a lack of maintenance of existing systems, decay of existing systems, and a failure to properly respond to the increasingly worse weather we are already experiencing as a result of climate change. If this report, when adopted with its 16 recommendations, it provides a tool for affected residents and for this council to bang the drum for serious change at a Welsh Government and UK government level, then we will have done our job, because the existing situation cannot be allowed to continue. This report by itself is not going to fix flooding in Sandycroft or anywhere else in Flintshire, but it is a tool to start applying political pressure to those who ultimately can make the decisions to improve the lives of people who are affected by flooding at a Welsh Government and UK government level. Councillor Jones, because we've had summing up, I wouldn't normally let somebody come in, but if it's brief.
Yes, it will be brief. Can you hear me all right? Because I haven't spoken yet. I don't know whether you can hear me. So just confirm that. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. All right. Thanks for that. It's just on page 371. I was reading this as you were speaking, so I apologise for the coming after the summing up. On page 371, there seems to be a disagreement between a witness and Andy Roberts in relation to the possible design of schemes through SUDS. Now, I know, would it be wise, first of all, before this goes to full council, to have a bit more information on what the disagreement is? Because I think we don't want that at full council. We don't want to hear that. We should hear that conversation before it goes to full council. So I'm minded that both sides of the argument should be heard prior to going to full council, so that we don't, and as been mentioned before about resourcing in committee meetings, prior to going to that full council meeting, it might be wise to hear both sides at this committee perhaps, and understand the reasons why. And I imagine Andy Farrow, who's on here at the moment, might have some advice in relation to that. That would be my advice, so that this kind of conversation, or the two sides of the argument, are heard and understood before it goes to full council.
Thank you, Councillor Jones. As regards the section of the report reports on the evidence that it has received from witnesses. We had quite a lengthy discussion on that point at the oral evidence session. The witnesses took different views. It is their right to take different views. Where witnesses have taken different views and the committee has come to a conclusion as to who was right, that is reflected in the report. On this question, the committee doesn't feel that it has the technical knowledge to make a determination, and so has represented the views of both parties. The views of both parties and the disagreement is referenced in one of the recommendations. I think from memory it's recommendation 1. Yes, it is recommendation 1, that further exploration of this is needed. The committee has recommended that further exploration, but believes that it should be undertaken by Welsh Government at a national level rather than a local level. I can't see this becoming an issue at full council, because whilst the issue that witnesses disagreed on is significant, it's not germane to the next steps that the committee recommends. So what occurred at the oral evidence session is faithfully reported. I don't think anybody would disagree with that, but it is not material to the recommendations that the committee makes, beyond suggesting that further research by people who are qualified should be undertaken. Mr. Farrow?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. So a couple of things there in relation to Councillor Jones's point. I think, you know, quite within the rights to advance an item if they want to understand, you know, the implications of SUDS, and that potentially could go on the forward work programme, would be my stance on that. The second one is that if this is going to full council, I don't think it's helpful to anybody to have individual named within the report, particularly where there's a difference of opinion. So I would say that it probably needs to be addressed, and those names come out of it.
I would point out that witnesses said what they said in meetings open to the public, so it's already a matter of public record, the views the witnesses advanced. And again, I don't think that this is a controversial issue. Councillor Jones, your hand is still up, but am I correct in thinking that's a legacy hand? Thank you. Councillor Healy.
Thank you, Chair. I think I possibly seconded the recommendation, but I think Councillor Jones has raised a valid point that does concern me, and I'm no longer prepared to second it unless I think something is done to take those names out. Because although, yes, it's in the public domain already, if it goes to full council, then we know that the press just picks up on diversity and disagreement. And my fear is that the press would just highlight this particular area of disagreement rather than the other valuable comments in the report. And they would lose sight of that. So what I'm saying is, if I did second it, I'm no longer prepared to second it unless those names are taken out, because I'm inclined to agree with Councillor Jones.
Okay, right. Points of procedure. A seconder cannot withdraw the motion nor withdraw their seconding of it. The proposer may, but the seconder can't. So the motion still stands. Prior to this report being put on the agenda papers for this meeting, it was sent to Andy Roberts, it was sent to Paul Reeves and Victoria Then on the flood risk management team. They've all confirmed that they are happy with it. A number of minor changes were put forward by the officers, and those have been incorporated, which concerned certain technical aspects. So there's been no objection to this from the individual. Mr. Farrow?
That may be the case, but what they didn't realise was that it was going to get advanced to full council for discussion there. So I think we're moving into a different arena, aren't we? If the proposition is supported.
Yeah, I'm aware that we're going quite far down a rabbit hole after summing up here and reopening the debate. Councillor Maddison, is it a point of procedure?
Thank you, Chair. No, just to say I cannot agree with names being named if this is going to full council. There's already too much misinformation out there on social media. If the names are included, I shall vote against. Thank you.
Councillor Jones, again, if we can stick to points of procedure.
It's a point of procedure. I presume if the seconder is not able to withdraw his seconding, he is able to vote against.
Yes, of course. Councillor Dolphin?
Yes, thank you, Chairman. and the advice on the procedure. Is it normal procedure to actually take proposers and support it was virtually supported before it was even discussed, this document, although it's a very informative document. I just wonder if that was normal procedure as well.
I'm sorry, would you be able to clarify that? I'm not sure I managed to hear all of it.
Well, we went straight into recommendations basically and accepting them, and then it was all discussed. So the proposer and the seconder actually came straight in without anything being discussed, really, as if they'd made their minds up before it came to the committee.
Thank you.
Just a question of procedure, that's all.
Yes, no, you are right. Council rules of procedure say that nobody may speak on a motion before it has been proposed and seconded. So a proposer and a seconder are needed before there is any debate on any issue at any council or committee of the council. I know some other chairs take speakers before a motion is moved and seconded, but council procedure rules state that a motion must be proposed and must be seconded before there can be any debate on any of the topics. So I hope that answers that point of order. Councillor Marshall.
Can we add an amendment that we take out the names then?
You may, ordinarily. We have had summing up, but I will allow it. So
we can all vote against it if need be.
Forgive me, Councillor Jones, did you have the page reference? I think it was 371 in the document pack. Councillor Marshall, do you have alternative wording that you're proposing?
Just to do what the discussion has been about deleting the names. So if you delete the names, that's the amendment, I assume. And then we can vote for it with the names deleted, if that's acceptable to everybody else.
Forgive me one moment. I'm just looking through the wording to try and establish how this might operate. So if people are following along, page 371, the fourth paragraph down, I think the proposal is to delete the words Councillor Sam Swash. The fifth paragraph, delete the last sentence. The sixth paragraph, delete the words with Mr. Roberts in the first line and replace Councillor Swash with the first witness in the third line. That would be Councillor Marshall's proposal. Councillor Marshall, are you happy that that accurately captures what you're suggesting? You're on mute, Councillor Marshall.
If it deletes all the names and everybody else is happy, that's what we'll vote on, I suppose.
I'm going to second it first.
Yeah, Councillor Jones, you're not a member of this committee, so if your hand is up to second this, you can't. Does Councillor Marshall have a second of that? Councillor Coppell, brilliant.
I'm not. I wasn't seconded it, Councillor. It was just a point I was going to make. If that's okay.
Right. If we can go through the chair. So Councillor Marshall has tabled an amendment, which I have read out a moment ago, regarding the impact that would have on the wording. Councillor Coppell has seconded it. I am happy to accept that amendment as the proposer. Councillor Healy is the seconder. Are you happy to accept that amendment? You are, brilliant. Councillor Jones, right, so that Councillor Marshall's amendment now becomes part of the substantive. So that's what we're voting on with that amendment made. Councillor Jones, do you have
It's just going
point
back
that you
to,
still
yeah,
wish
I
to-
understand that's a substantive recommendation. That's fine, and I'll talk just quickly to that. So yes, that's one of the points I made. And the other issue I think it's been made, Andy Farrow has just said that you provided and you confirmed that you'd provided those to Andy Roberts and Mr. Reeves to review. When they've reviewed it, I'm assuming they did so in the context of it being in this committee, and probably did not understand that you were probably going to forward this as a recommendation to full council. So it might be wiser. I'm just saying it might be wiser to get that more full response from the officers before it goes to full council, understanding that once that is received, the next step is to go to full council, because I just don't want to, it's just a matter of wasting time and resource. Let's face it, this is going to be, it will be discussed at full council. It will take time. If there's anything that is any value, it should be made prior to it going to full council, so that members can understand the benefits and disbenefits, so that when it goes to full council, if it then goes to full council, all members have that knowledge at hand. I don't think it's helpful to have that knowledge provided at full council when the resource and the cost of that is much more than it would be at this committee. That's my point, it's a resource and cost issue.
Okay, Councillor Jones, can I ask whether that's the position of the Cabinet or whether you're speaking personally?
No, I'm speaking personally. It's just purely as a member, I believe that would be a more sensible approach rather than going straight to full council without having proper feedback from the officer, which you would normally expect.
Okay, thank you very much for your comment. If there are no further speakers, we will move to the vote. I don't see any further speakers. So all those in favour of the motion as amended by Councillor Marshall, please show. And those against? And any abstentions? Okay, that is carried by a majority vote of 7-0 with 1 abstention. Thank you very much. We now move on to agenda item 9, which is the Forward Work Programme. This is page 381 in your document packs. We've had a number of comments about adding things to the Forward Work Programme during this meeting. First of all, can I ask for a mover and a seconder for the Forward Work Programme? Do I have a mover or a seconder? I do not appear to have a mover or a seconder, so that item falls. That is the final agenda item, so thank you very much. I wish you a good day. I hereby close the meeting.
Andy, have you got a minute, please?
Excuse me, Councillor Jones, I haven't been able to stop the live streaming yet. Some reason.
Richard, do you just want me to Teams you?
You can phone me if you want, yeah, that's fine.
Okay.
I do apologise, it's stopped now. I've just stopped the recording.